All right. Well, hello and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Susie Harding and I am the Membership and Program Coordinator for Shaker Museum. This program is one of the last 3 events of our summer series and we are so glad that you are joining us. We have with us tonight Heather Ashworth and Mark Hendry, and this is part of following our theme of the Shaker ethos of being in the work. And for Shakers, this referred not only to the labors inherent in communal life, but also to the work of living each day according to the values that define their faith: community, inclusion, innovation, integrity, and conviction. Over the course of our summer series this year, we've tried to create opportunities to explore the many ways we can be in the work to make our own communities inclusive, supportive, and sustainable. Our guests, Heather and Mark, tonight are not Shakers or particularly scholars of Shaker history, and I should hasten to add that neither am I. However, in meeting and talking with Heather and Mark, I am struck by the extent to which their stories and their approaches to their work speak so clearly of Shaker values. And I know they have taught Shaker style woodworking and broom making for some time. So as we hear about their careers and their creative practices tonight, I hope you'll recognize, as I did, this great sense of generosity, humility, and dedication to sharing knowledge that passes on skills, but also builds community. And to me, it really demonstrates how the influence of the Shaker material culture impacts craftspeople today beyond simply emulating a style or an aesthetic. So we're gonna be chatting in this spotlight format. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll be sure to share them with Mark and Heather. And you can ask questions throughout, and we've allowed some time at the end, so you can be sure to get those in. And finally, I also want to let you know the exciting news that Heather will be visiting us in person in September here at the Mount Lebanon site in New Lebanon. And we will be having an oval carrier workshop and a cobweb and hearth broom workshop. So at the end of this event, we'll be sharing you the details so you can be sure to join us for that. So now I'm going to go to the magic of screen share. Thank you. So first, I want to tell you about Heather Ashworth, who is joining us tonight. Heather has been in the woodworking world since high school. She was originally interested in architecture and construction. By her senior year, she went to attend a trade school in St. Louis, Missouri, where she developed more furniture-based skills. Following trade school, Heather enrolled at Murray State University in Murray, Kentucky, and she graduated with a BFA in furniture design and utilitarian ceramics. This is all pictures of her work as we go through here. Immediately following graduation, Heather was awarded a residency at the Arrowmont School of Arts and Crafts in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. She loved the mountains and craft school setting, and Heather jumped at the opportunity to work for Arrowmont when a position became open at the end of her residency. Over the past 8 years, Heather has upgraded and maintained the Arrowmont School woodshop studios as head technician, and in her spare time, she continues a small studio practice that consists mostly of furniture commissions, bentwood box carriers, trays, and in the Shaker style, and brooms. Heather also enjoys teaching several times a year for both youth and adults via craft schools, local maker spaces, and from her home shop. Her most recent endeavor is working with an industrial makerspace, Able Trade of Knoxville, Tennessee, and she's helping to grow their programming. And then we also have with us Mark, and these are some of his works. Mark Hendry is a full-time artisan and instructor of historic handcraft, specializing in brooms and basketry with a focus on using natural materials. With over 30 years of experience as a professional teacher and of fine and performing arts, both in private, public, and magnet schools, Mark travels across the country as a master instructor, teaching all levels of students from 3 to 93. He teaches regularly for the John Campbell Folk School. Whoop, I lost something. I guess that was the end of it. And he's teaches for the John Campbell Folk School and the Arrowmont School of Arts and Crafts, and he's a featured member of the Southern Highland Craft Guild. So welcome both of you for coming, and thank you. We're so glad to have you. I'm going to let you tell us each a little bit about yourselves and how you came to your practices, and teach us a little bit about brooms and your woodworking. So Heather, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days?
You covered it pretty well. Outside of working 40-hour job with Aramont, the woodshop technician specifically, and that's everything from working with instructors like Mark, that's how I know Mark, who comes in every couple of years. We had him just a couple weeks ago. And so I work with the instructors on materials and equipment that they might need, anything that will make their time in class run smoother. But then I also maintain the shop itself. I maintain the equipment, any updates to not per se the facilities, but if it does involve my shop, I do work with those who need to be involved in that. And then just kind of the shop function in general. I do work with a team of people. We do have 3 buildings. And so there are 2 other technicians and then my boss, and that makes up the 4 people that run all the studios at Aramont School. Outside of that time, I do still maintain a practice. Like you said, I do furniture mostly based off of commissions. I don't do a whole lot of furniture anymore unless somebody reaches out to me. And so that kind of gave me the opportunity, and especially working for Aramont and working so close to Appalachia craft and everything, was to get into more of the craft movement, like the shaker carriers and shaker life in general, the brooms as well, and just kind of knowing what's out there altogether. So that's kind of what I'm doing nowadays. And then what you mentioned at the end, and this is a relatively new adventure, or venture, I should say, it's an adventure also, is working with some friends of mine in Knoxville who have a maker space, an industrial maker space. And I'm kind of helping them work on some programmings off and on here
or there. Okay. That's so great. Thank you very much. And when you, how does your personal practice get to fit into that? What is your favorite thing to make? And how are you getting to teach that on your own?
Favorite thing to make is so subjective, honestly, because it's a little bit of the ebb and flow of the time of year sometimes, what I'm interested in. I don't usually lose interest in stuff. I just gain interest in other things. And so some things may shift for a while and be put on the back burner until I can revisit it again. That definitely happened with furniture. I love making furniture and I'd love to do it more often, but it's just not something that I can do currently. I did forget to mention that I do also chair restoration, and I'm trying to kind of build that a little bit more in the Knoxville area. I have some friends that I'm actually wearing their shirt, Silver River Chair, Brandy and Dave of Silver River Chair, that I do some work with. I was weaving chairs before them, but I've been working with them on doing more commission-based restoration to furniture. And I think all together, it just is helpful for me to do my job in general, like to kind of take in the information and the knowledge that is out there about all these crafts, whether I do it physically or I just can have a conversation with people about what they do. And I can verbalize with them. I can talk with them. I understand what they're saying. And then I can ask them questions.
Great. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about what your practice is like and how your teaching and getting to make your own brooms has developed?
Sure. I have been, I would say, really always been an artist. And as I got older, I became a crafts person. I've been a very outdoorsy person, connected to nature. So even from when I was really, really young, finding objects in nature, finding things outside and making things out of them. And always been a bit of an entrepreneur, so selling them. And a lot of the work that I did, I worked in gardens, I worked in different environments where I got to use my hands and work with natural materials before college. And I went to college to learn business when I had a business. And all I had left to take were my last year of electives, so I left because I really I went for a purpose, and I had the purpose, I had the knowledge I wanted. So I ran business for a long time. And I've always done art throughout my life. Always done art, always been a gardener. I've been an outdoor person. And I retired at 39. So at that point, I had to find something to do with myself. And I ended up going to the John Campbell Folk School and taking some classes, and having a large collection of things like antlers. My wife had signed me up for an antler basketry class. And the act of weaving things together, of using my hands, of using natural materials and found materials, was way more pleasurable than I thought, because the sound of basketry to me sounded very unappealing. And although it isn't in other countries, in this country, it seemed like, oh, that's, you always make fun of underwater basketry as your college when you don't know what to take.
I'd heard that one.
It didn't really appeal to me, but when I took it, it really spoke to me. And it really started to combine my love of the outdoors and the natural materials and the using my hands to create my art. So I also took a broom making class because I was already collecting sticks and things. I was making rustic furniture and anything that would get me outdoors. And the broom making, I thought, went well with the basketry because it was kind of had that weaving and using your hands for the same thing. And it really spoke to me also. And the person that I took with, who's a second generation of 3 generations of broom maker, his father actually made brooms, and he thought, why not take those brooms and turn them into art? And that was Ralph Gates. Marlo Gates was my teacher, and Ralph Gates was his dad. And he put together one of the first art shows in Sarasota, Florida, of all brooms that were just for art. And I loved the idea of taking something that is functional and elevating it to that level of art. Because I feel like when you look back, at Shaker work, it was functional and beautiful. It was never one at the cost of the other. It was always one enhancing the other. And that together they made something greater than the sum of their parts. And that really spoke to me and has continued to speak to me through the broom work that I do. So a lot of the broom work I do is traditional, and a lot of it is very Shaker inspired. But a lot of it is also, how can I go past what is conventional to an actual broom that is a piece of art, that is a piece of artwork. So I do a lot of wedding brooms and a lot of custom brooms and a lot of brooms for collectors. There are actually broom collectors who have, hundreds of brooms, and they're always looking for something new. So there's a niche.
This is a great segue. If you could bring us back and tell us a little bit about different kinds of brooms so that we can appreciate what art brooms are and what they're made, what are the materials that are traditionally made, what are people using now?
Sure. Okay, so brooms in this country started, broom corn, which is sorghum, is the traditional material. And that's what most brooms that you see, whisk brooms and things that you see, are made out of sorghum, which has seeds on it. Can you see that? No, probably. Yeah, see the seeds?
Yeah, we can see it.
We scrape the seeds off, and this is what we get. And then it's actually somewhat fire resistant, and it's very strong fiber. It was originally used in this country for roof thatching and to feed chickens with the seeds. And in 1797, Levi Dickinson actually made the first brooms out of what was left over, which was the sorghum tassel. And his wife said they were the best brooms she ever used. And within 4 years, he had opened the first broom shop in this country. So by the time it got to the Shakers, it was probably about 1810. And the Shakers realized that besoms were the brooms. So let's see. So this is a besom. It's a round broom. Mm-hmm. All brooms were round in this country until the Shakers, the women, and it really came from the women. So I think it's really important to note that in this day and age of the issues with women, that for the Shakers, women were a very listened to, responsible part of the culture. And they decided when you pushed the broom flat, it swept better. So if you sewed it flat, it would sweep better. So they sewed the very first brooms. And they also, when we make brooms, we make them 18th century style. And we have to soak the broom corn and we wet it, and we use all hand tools, historic handcraft. But then the Shakers realized if you could use wire and tension, you wouldn't have to go through that drying process. You could make the brooms 5 times as fast and produce them at a faster rate, which would be better for profits. And so they came up with the first assembly machines for brooms. So that by it's either 1830 or 1840, brooms were one of the largest exports of the United States. And it's all thanks to the Shakers and how they developed things. And and I learned this from you, is that when they would, what's it called when they would patent their machinery, it was just to protect it from being stolen from themselves, from their cultures being able to use it, but everyone was allowed to use it. Is that right?
I think that's right. I've actually asked some folks here, and we've talked about maybe doing some new research and a new blog into sort of the history of how the patents worked. But I know that
makes sense, and it follows their values, which I also think are very commendable.
And the thing about their values, Heather, when I first met you and we were talking about how you made that transition from making oval boxes into broom making, your creative community helped you do that. Can you talk a little bit about that sharing of knowledge and skills that helped you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of funny. I did not learn from Mark directly to begin with. I have since worked with him personally, but it was a student of his who taught at Aeromont because we asked her to, where she had put one of her brooms in a local community gallery show. And we had asked her, can you teach a class? And almost half of Aeromont took her class. And a couple of us kind of took off with it. So I was one of the ones that took off with it, but it technically wasn't until the beginning of the pandemic and we were shut down for a little while. And I don't know, I just thought, you know what, this is a good time. I feel comfortable with boxes. I feel comfortable with shaker, everything. This is the time for me to really dive a little bit more heavily into the brooms. And so I worked on it, and of course, because of social media, I started following some broom makers, and they started following me and communicating back and forth. And then I reached out to Mark, and I was like, hey, can I come out? And he was like, absolutely, come in and hang out and make brooms. And so I did that this last spring. He and I did that. And then I will be seeing Mark next Wednesday for a very similar thing. And another student of his who is working with me personally, she's taken shaker classes from me. And then I've kind of assisted helping her get back, and she's been wanting to get back into broom making. And she's a wonderful, she makes pens, she turns pens. They're beautiful, beautiful writing pens. And so she's kind of getting into the craft movement herself. And so she and I are both visiting Mark. And so it's just about the shared knowledge, just not coveting anything. And nobody seems, at least so far, anybody that I've talked to or asked, hey, that's very interesting. How did you do this? Hey, that's beautiful. Like, do you have any videos on said technique? Or again, talking to Mark, like, I'm not comfortable with plating by myself yet. Can you and I work on plating together? And that's, maybe we should show that as we're talking. It's this part right here. Yes, this part of the broom. He said, absolutely, because I was very, very comfortable with, and I probably don't have enough brooms with me. I was very comfortable doing it without, I have one hanging behind, without, this is actually not mine, but I'm showing it because that's the closest one to me. So I was very comfortable doing it without the plating. And so that's really what he helped me with. And again, no arrogance at all from anybody, Mark definitely included, but anybody that I've talked to or reached out, it's just been this beautiful, wonderful community to just kind of share. And I've always been about that, kind of going back to the question you asked Mark and I at the beginning. And I know Mark feels the same way because he teaches even more than I do. But I do love making what I make. But really, I've always seen myself, Mark has always seen himself as an artist. I've never quite had that feeling. I've never had the feeling of being an artist. I have a feeling of being a tradesman, a craftsman. But really, and the reason I kind of took on the job at Aeromont was I knew I wasn't going to be the next Rembrandt. I knew I wasn't going to be the next, Leonardo or anything like that. So for me, it was about, but what I could do is facilitate the knowledge to another person or help them process or think through or have the facilities to do what they do, and maybe they will. you know, maybe they will be the next this or that, you know, and that's fine with me. And so I do love doing the teaching, and the fact that I haven't done it more has really just been because of my current job. And I haven't even thought about, you know, pushing that at all, because I have done it enough via Aramont, but now I am wanting to get more out there. And I have in the last couple of years have gotten more out there, taught out of my house, taught at some other places, including Aramont, and then John C. Campbell Folk School coming up. So, yeah.
Do you guys see sort of an increase in people being interested in having or making handmade things? And
Absolutely.
Is that
yes,
pre-COVID, or is that a COVID phenomenon, do you think?
No.
Pre-COVID?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely pre-COVID. I think you see it as far as, I hate to say what's in or what's popular, you know, it became the carving wood spoons and the making carving bowls. And there's a return, just like there's a return of the farm to table food trend.
A resurgence of craft.
With the making things yourself, the making my own clay bowls and my own clay pottery and carving things out of wood. There's a return to there's a real strong return, and even like in New York and Brooklyn and those kind of places, of returning to that kind of historic handcraft.
A lot of knife makers right now too. Like knife making is a big thing that's kind of going on. But yes, to piggyback off of that, it's a major reinsurgence of craft right now. And I would say probably the last 5 or 10 years, it really maybe started taking off 5 years ago, but you start seeing it, probably 10 years ago? Absolutely. Outside of craft schools, outside of like because craft schools have been around for a while. So outside of when
I started seeing wood spoons turning up everywhere, you know, and you know, that kind of thing. It's like everybody wanted to carve a wood spoon. And that would say about 10 years ago.
Yeah, we had somebody comment that it's sort of another way to look for an understated version of luxury, and craft fulfills that. And I think it is kind of a definition of, I think I agree with that, particularly in that it's a sense of quality sort of instead of bling. You know, it's a different definition of what makes something really special to have a handmade.
Well, not only that,
actually in my, I'm sorry, Mark.
Oh, I was just going to say, not only that, but I think we went through a period of time where people got disconnected from the making of things, literally. I had people, you know, I ran a gallery for several years, and people would come in with their kids, and I'd be making a basket, and they'd say, honey, that's what they had before we had the little Walmart plastic bags. There was such a disconnect to where we've come from. And there was that no sense of, people didn't make things anymore. You sit at a computer and I mean, I'm also a photographer, and one reason I'm not really into photography is it's so much time at the computer. And it's not the same as putting your hands on something and making something with your hands. And like in the case of Brooms, or it's making something almost out of nothing. And that there's a magic to that I think really entices people.
There's a self-reliance that, because Brooms in particular, I'm working with a group in Chattanooga coming up here, and they're growing broom corn. Mark grows his own broom corn. And as long as we could somehow figure out how to, you know, twist our own twine, you know, we could be pretty self-sufficient with that, with just broom corn, with just found sticks, if we were doing long broom handles and that sort of thing. And as long as we had something to bind it with, it's a very self-sufficient product that people can do. And so I think it's in the same with, like you said, spoon carving. You could have minimal tools. I know people like to have hundreds of different, but really you could have 3 or 4, you know, top things to carve a spoon with, and you're set. All you need is a branch or a fallen limb, or, you know, some people do it out of dry wood even, you know, just depends on who's carving it. But to Mark's point, in my thesis from school, I'll pull down my postcard. I still have my postcard here from my show, my final show here. I have Danish cord weaving both on my seat, but also on my shelves here. That was part of my thesis, that it's like everything's IKEA, everything is a step back. So that what that means is when people go to move, they just throw things out. They throw it on the curb. I mean, you still find old chairs that people don't know how to refurbish and how to fix, and you'll find that out just on the curb, and you're like, what are you doing? This is a beautiful chair. But lucky us, because we can pick it up and we know what to do with it. And so that was the whole point of my final show for my BFA, was I want to go back to heirlooms. This somebody I knew made, or even if it wasn't somebody I knew, even if you had a story, or even knowing that it was handmade because it's not stamped with an IKEA stamp or something like that, you could say somebody made this. So, you know, and especially if it was somebody in your family, you're more likely to hold on to something and to keep that as a little bit of a precious thing. I'm not.
So if you don't come back in a minute, you might want to just turn your camera off and turn it on again for me.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Well, you're coming back
you froze too, actually.
And Mark, are you frozen too?
I'm not frozen. You guys look good to me.
So we'll just take a minute and let our cameras regroup.
Okay.
Frozen?
Yeah.
I don't feel frozen.
As long as my audio didn't freeze, I guess is the good thing.
You're back. We'll beg the patient. Everybody's back here. We'll beg the patience of our audience that's with us and edit appropriately as we need to.
Sure.
One thing I wanted to touch base on is your Etsy and Instagram page is called Made Last Night Studio, which I just love.
Yes.
And then, but you had a quote also that was a very Shaker quote about that I'm going to try to say right. Do your work as though you have 1,000 years to live and as though you knew you would die tomorrow. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how those two things fit together.
So the Made Last Night name, funny enough, came from, I had the opportunity to take a ukulele class, and I was looking for boxes, cigar boxes, obviously, to make this ukulele class with a friend of mine. He's actually, I was talking knife making, he's a local knife maker, but he was making ukuleles before he made knives. He's a very musical person. And I came across this box. It was Made Last Night, and it was a New Orleans chocolate company. And it was a beautiful old box. And I always just loved that. But it also spoke to me because I thought it was funny that really the only way like I could take this class or I could continue my practice was outside of, again, my 9 to 5, which is literally 9 to 5, 5 days or more a week, depending on your weeks. And so I would go in after work at night and still maintain this practice because I felt that draw. I felt that kind of need to still be creative, to know, to put into practice what I was picking up at work and talking to people and seeing other crafters come through, other tradesmen come through. And I didn't want to let that go. And so going to the quote now, I don't know, that quote, I don't retain a lot of poems and quotes and sayings and that sort of thing. But that one always just spoke to me and stuck with me because I come from a working family. I come from a family that just, we're going all the time. My grandfather was a farm kid. And so even though he got a job in the city and also a 9 to 5, he maintained a garden. I mean, a huge vegetable garden. He would come home, change into his garden clothes, which were overalls, like really adorable overalls, which I think was his father's overalls, if I remember correctly. And he would go out there and he would basically garden farm, you know, and they would have fresh fruits and vegetables. And I just haven't known. And then I've had a job since I was 11. I had a paper route. And so for me, it was kind of always taking pride in the work, not so much that I made said thing, but that I'm being productive. But it doesn't mean to me that I should rush it. So to me, I want to do as much stuff as I can, but I want to take enough pride into it to make it something utilitarian, but elegant at the same time. I want an elegance to it. And so that's how I feel about Brooms. I feel like it's this beautiful balance between utilitarian and elegance. Because any of our brooms, Mark's brooms, my broom, even his wedding brooms are very beautiful and they're meant to be hung on the wall, but somebody could sweep with it if they really wanted to. You know, it is truly functional. And I love that. I've always loved that. And so to me, that's kind of how the quote speaks to me, is that you are taking the time for something, but you're not just stopping there. You're continuing on with it. You are putting all your effort, all your self into it, even if it leaves and you never see it again. Mark and I say this thing, or at least I think you say it. I know I definitely say it, but we say in the wild. So if we go to people's houses or if they post things about our stuff and we see our thing that we made, we call it in the wild. So brooms in the wild or shaker boxes in the wild. And so the pictures that you showed at the beginning of this, for me in particular, those are all pictures that have that I've either seen in person or somebody has sent to me of my thing, my shaker, my broom. Actually, I don't know that I had any brooms in those pictures. I think they were mostly furniture and shaker objects. Mm-hmm. And to me, that just feels so special because I can tell you about how all of those are being used, how they're all being utilized, how they're all being loved in the everyday use of it. And that is something that speaks to me more than having my name in lights, being that, like I said, Rembrandt earlier, to know that even if my name is forgotten with time, somebody will pick this up and be like, somebody made this, like, this is really cool. And it's still here, 100 years later, long after I'm dust. And I find that very satisfying.
It's very cool. Do you find, Mark, when you have all these students come through that people are pursuing that kind of satisfaction as well? Or
Absolutely.
Are they already makers? Are they new to it?
Well, let me first piggyback onto Heather's quote, because that's one of my teaching principles. Is I always teach as if I were going to die tomorrow. Okay. And I say that in every class that I teach because there are no secrets in my class. I don't want to die knowing anything that I know that I haven't passed on to someone else. Yeah. And the more I give my students and the more amazing they become, the more I'm challenged to up my game. So it's definitely a win-win for me. But I always say that on my first day of teaching is that there are no secrets for me because I don't want to die with anything inside. I want it all out. So that's one of the ways. And that's why, like with Heather, I always share everything. And she'll tell you that. I don't hold back anything. Anything that I know, I give you my notes, everything that I've ever written, everything that I've ever learned, everything that I have access to, you have access to. When you take my class, everyone that I have as a wholesaler, you have as a wholesaler. If I know how to get stuff that you don't know how to get, I'll make sure you know how to get it. Am I right?
That was a recent conversation, actually. Yep. How do I get this? Okay, this is what you do. This is who you call.
Yeah, because that's, and to me that, and it's so funny because when I posted on social media, someone said, I'm so proud of what you're doing and how you're getting out there and sharing this information. And this was someone who, and I said, I've been taught by a lot of great sharers. Everyone that I've learned from has been a great sharer. So I was taught by those people that that's the way you do it. And
that's so interesting.
And it feels right. It feels right in my gut to do it that way.
And it's so interesting because the other thing I feel like we've been increasingly aware of is making sure that artists are properly paid for their work.
And I have a challenge with that. You want to know why my prices go up? Because my students' prices go up. They go, and they always say, you don't charge enough. And it's like, oh, I know. Yeah. But they do. And I would say almost half the people on Instagram have taken my class and they go off and build businesses. And I love that. It doesn't diminish any part of my life. It only enhances it because part of what I make are brooms and part of what I make are broom makers. Mm-hmm. And I'm way more proud of the broom makers than the brooms.
It's really neat.
That's kind of funny that Mark and I have talked about this before about trying to pass on as much knowledge. I think that's why we talk so much to the point of like, we might over talk and overshare and put too many stories or too many this or that. And we feel like, well, I don't feel like I'm rushing, but we could have a very full, busy, chatty class because it's like, I've got to get all this information to you right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes I feel like the students leave a little bit like, oh my gosh, like I need to go lay down. That was a lot of information, but at least we're like, yes, but at least you have it now. At least you have that information.
I still feel like I would love to know a little bit more about, at the beginning you showed us like a small broom with a little hook on the end.
Yes. I'll start it, but Mark will have to take I'll start it, but Mark will take over. So when I visited Mark this spring, I brought this page out of a magazine. I've been keeping this page around for 10 years or so. And there's a couple brooms in the picture. And one broom is at like this weird angle. You could barely see it. Like literally, this is the angle that it's sitting at away from the broom. And the other brooms are all sitting facing perfectly towards the camera. And I was like, do you know this broom? And he's like, yes, I know that broom. That's a blah, blah, blah. And I was like, how do you even make this broom? This is a beautiful broom. I'm so intrigued by it because it's not like any of the brooms that I had seen around, because it's not really around. And Mark will explain that in a minute. He knew what it was. He brought out 2 brooms. Where are your brooms, Mark? He brought out the 2 brooms. The one is the original.
That's the original.
And then the other one is what a student of his makes, who she makes it now currently. And then the nice thing is that I kind of back engineered this because we didn't quite have time. He let me take as many pictures as I wanted. And so he back engineered it, or I back engineered it based off of looking at them in person and taking as many pictures as I could.
Well, and just knowing that it's lacquered. That what made it hard was
and that's
dipping it
the
over
part.
and over in lacquer.
Yes, and that's the helpful part, is that what makes it unique is that it's made out of the same material that the entire broom is, but this is completely hardened up here because of the lacquer. But he knew the name of it, and he had yes. So Mark.
Well, one of my greatest joys in what I do are my students. And this was a student that I had. I get people that are dead beginners, and I get people that have made brooms for 15 years but want to up their game. So I get people coming to me with all different levels of experience. And this was a couple that came to me that had retired. He was a retired doctor and his wife. And they had taken with it. Now, it's a really small community, the broom making community. And we all love each other. And we all recommend each other. So when people say, oh, what can I take for the next level? It's not uncommon for people to send them to me, because a lot of my broom maker friends will look at my stuff and go, you need to get a life. Like, cause I kind of like OCD, but like I like CDO because I like it in alphabetical order. So if you want to like really get picky, you can come take my class. Yeah. But these people really were into this whisk. So they went up to the Great Lakes area with the person who invented this style of whisk and got her to teach them. She lives in a lighthouse, and this original material they don't have available anymore. So they made it out of this, which is Tampico, but Tampico doesn't come in long enough lengths. So they were making small Tampico ones. So now I have some bigger fibers, and Heather and I are going to play with some bigger ones. But they showed me, they literally made one for me. They showed me how it was made. And that's what I mean. We all learn from each other. I learned from my students. They learned from me. I learned from their questions. They ask if we can do, I never say no. One of my rules as a teacher is if you say, can I do it this way? And like Heather says, I go, if it works for you, then yes, you can. Because in the end, there isn't a right way or a wrong way to do anything in art or craft. There's just whatever works for you. So I'll teach you the knots I know. I'll teach you the methods I know. But if you find another way that works for you, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean you're doing it the wrong way. And maybe you'll find a better way. So when my students say, hey, can I try this? Like, I'll give you an example. This is a triad whisk. It's a whisk style that came from Japan. The number 3 is very significant in Japan for good luck and well-being. This came back. Chris from Berea took his class on a trip, and this is one of the styles that came back. One of my students said she didn't like the way the top was cut. And she said, could I sand that on a belt sander? And I was like, yeah, I'm thinking it's going to totally fall apart and not work, but sure, give it a shot, see what happens. And it works. And I do it all the time now. And I teach my students to do it. I learned it. Yeah. I think for me, one of the important things is as a teacher to never lose my sense of curiosity, just to be curious, because it's all a learning experience. And I've never learned anything. And this is an honest statement that I also make in my classes. I've never learned anything by doing it right. I once took a shaker basket class, and I walked in and the teacher had the information and the materials, and I did everything perfectly. I made the most, she couldn't believe what a beautiful, perfect shaker basket that I made. And when I went home, I thought, oh, I should try and make another one. And I didn't have a clue how to start. But because I didn't make any mistakes, I really don't know what I did. It's in the mistakes that we learn. Yeah. It's in those. It's in the, oh, I got to undo this and redo it. Every time a student makes a mistake, they're learning something that they're never going to forget. So I think
100% of mistakes are just opportunities. So, you know.
Yeah.
And that's all, because when you think about the perfection and the diligence into going to make shaker objects, they were people who also made mistakes and made innovations because somebody did something in a different way. And it was more the persistence to end up with a product that's right than the idea that it was perfectly smooth from beginning to end. I have to imagine. I will share, I remember reading this, or Jerry Grant telling this story. And I think I read this in one of the blogs, that there's a couple of baskets in our collection that had come from New Lebanon. And there were interviews or conversations with the shaker women who had made them. And there's one sister who had expressed some dismay that her basket was in there because it was one of her first ones. And she thought it was full of mistakes. Which, you know, to anybody else looking at it, you would never know. But when it's your own work, you see it. But they were also frugal enough that if you made a useful thing, you used it. But I do think, particularly for makers, we find the shakers so inspiring that it's encouraging to me to think that, you know, particularly we keep these iconic pieces, but it doesn't mean that from beginning to end it was made without that learning curve, because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to make the innovations they made.
Yeah.
And
you know, it's so interesting. In the Native American culture, there is a thing called the soul line. And that is where they intentionally put a mistake in the off chance that they do something so perfectly that then, because their thought is, if I do it so perfectly, then I'm done. I can't go any better than this. All I can do is go down. And so they have this soul line that they work into their work. And so it's an intentional mistake, basically, so that if they get to the end of their work and it's a perfect piece, then it's not perfect. So then they still have some place to go. And yeah, there was this gentleman, I'm not going to remember his name at all, but he worked for the Smithsonian, and we were talking about back engineering before, and he was reverse engineering, and he was reverse engineering some furniture. I think it was green furniture. I dropped the broom, sorry. I think it was green furniture. I can't remember. I can't remember specifically whose it was. And he was basically late 1800s, early 1900s furniture. And he was down, you know, measuring everything, counting how many, like, you know, balls were turned on a stretcher. And he realized that on one side of a stretcher from the other side, that's where you connect your table legs. There was the decorative pieces. There was like one or two missing on the other side, or there was just one. It wasn't the same amount. And everything was also just so slightly rough, because if you kind of think of like the history of sandpaper and everything and how we over sand things, now if it's a flat surface, you could scrape it into this mirror finish. It's beautiful. And they would have had that technology, but these are undulations, and this is rough turning with like a pole lathe. And so it wasn't perfect. Now, as long as the leg height was exactly the same and this length was exactly the same, that was fine. So they basically probably didn't bother counting the decorative pieces. And he found that so interesting, because we see this furniture as perfection, as the thing this is what everybody goes towards when they make, you know, this style furniture. And we don't even realize that, no, it wasn't about that for these people. It wasn't about having exactly everything's precisely sanded to a mirror finish, or having exactly the same amount of decorative, you know, pieces on either side. You know, we're so perfectionist now that we can't not be. We can't work in. And I mean, I'll say that too. Like, I want to get better at making this broom, because I'm seeing all the wispy hairs sticking out of it. But at the same time, I don't want it to be perfect either, because I don't want it to feel too machine made. You know, I do want to have a piece of myself in it, which is flawed. And so I hope that I never reach that perfection piece. And even though I say that, whenever I'm making my boxes and I cut the fingers in the boxes, that's the
swallowtails?
The swallowtails right here. I'm getting a little bit dark in here. That I have to remember that it's like, it doesn't need to be perfect. And why would I want it to be perfect in the first place? Because I'm not a machine, and I shouldn't strive for that. I should strive to have a little bit of the maker's mark, basically, in our pieces.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we are beginning to come to the end of our time, and I think it's so great to hear about the way you teach, because I need to remind everybody that on September 11th and 12th, Heather is going to be with us. She's going to get to be in the Brethren's workshop at the Mount Lebanon Historic Site, which was the first gathering place for the central ministry of the Shakers. And she's going to be teaching on Saturday and Sunday morning. Make sure I get it right,
morning is the Shaker Carriers.
Morning is the Carriers. And then each afternoon will be cobweb brooms and hearth brooms. Do you want to tell us, those will be round brooms? Yes?
Yeah, round brooms, cobweb, yeah. He has and I will be using natural sticks. So in my own practice, because I'm a furniture maker to start with, and when I go into the woods, I do like to just kind of hike. I'm not much of a forager for the pieces. I don't have an affinity to like find them personally. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I was like, well, I have access to plenty of wood, and I do melt painting of my furniture. So for me, that just made sense to kind of keep to who I am. And so these two examples of these brooms I will bring a few of these if students really want to use wooden handles like these, but I will also bring some natural wood handles like the ones behind Mark with me. And so they will make a cobweb broom and then a small hearth broom. And yeah, that's what we're going to do.
It's going to be great. Thank you so much. That's great.
Spaces are limited though, so make sure you sign up soon.
Absolutely, everyone. Please do sign up soon. And Mark, you have classes down where you are coming up?
Yes, I'm teaching during Scottish Heritage Week. I'm teaching willow basketry at the John Campbell Folk School. Then in October, I'm teaching a wizard broom class, which is a collaboration between, so I can pull here. So a wood carving teacher who does these awesome carvings.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
So that'll be the stick. And then we put brooms on the sticks. So we're doing cobweb and hearth brooms on carved handles. So that'll be in October. And then in November, I have shaker brooms and baskets. So we do the black ash baskets with Joanne Kelly Katzos, who's a very dear friend, very fun teacher. We have a very good time there. And we do cobweb brooms, whisk brooms, and hearth brooms.
Really
we have a very busy week.
Well, one of the silver linings of these crazy years we've been in is certainly as it's really expanded as a museum, and me personally, our online world and our reach to meet all these new friends who do this shaker inspired work. And so it makes me want to travel and get to go to all those places, and look forward to having occasions when we can get you guys up here.
Well, next year, in I think it's August or September, I'm supposed to be coming to upstate New York to teach. So I'll have to get with you.
We would love to get you to come and see us. It'll be really fun. And at the very last thing is we do have a garden party coming at the end, and we're so grateful to our sponsors. They'll be coming to that. There's still, through our website, opportunities to sponsor the series and also to get a membership to Shaker Museum, which we hope you will do. We would love to have more people involved and to keep you in touch with all the things we'll have planned throughout the year. So we're going to say thank you very much to everybody for coming. It's great to have you all here. I hope you'll keep in touch with us, and that if you'll be in our area, you'll come and learn how to make oval carriers and brooms with Heather very soon. So thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.